Are you feeling let down by your friends? Hi there, and welcome back to Ask Dr. Saira, the show where I answer your questions about personal growth, mental health, and relationships. Today's question comes from Manu. Manu says, my dad recently passed away, and the people who I thought would be there for me have really let me down. How do you continue a friendship with someone who wasn't there for you during one of the hardest times of your life? My dad recently passed away, and the people who I thought would be there for me have really let me down. How do you continue a friendship with someone who wasn't there for you during one of the hardest times of your life? It's a tough question. And it happens, right? It happens where there's kind of these test points, and sometimes people fail the test. So there's three things I want to talk to you about. The first is about sharing how you feel. The second is expectations and communication, and the third is grief. So let's start with sharing how you feel. Sometimes in friendship, there's kind of more of a difficulty in resolving tension than in families, because in a family, eventually you're going to have to deal with these people, you're going to have to interact, and so in families we'll kind of be more comfortable to go through the hard stuff because we know that this is my brother or this is my mom and they're going to be around. Like, even if I cut them off, they're still part of my my circle. Whereas with friends, you could lose a friendship and never think about or talk to that person ever again, and you can't do that when you're with family. So one of the things they found in the research is that we're more likely to have hard conversations with family members than we are with friends. And there aren't the same kind of rules, right? There aren't the same kind of expectations of friendship. Like, for example, if when a friend moves to another city and you're feeling sad about that, there's not the same kind of understanding of that than, say, if a family member were to move, right? So it's like we don't elevate friendship in the same way that we elevate family relationships. And so, though this is a really big thing for you, the people around you might not think it's that big of a deal, or the family members around you. So the first thing is about sharing how you feel. Share it with your journal if you want, or a loved one that is kind of a good sounding board. And most importantly, and the most difficult is actually sharing it with that friend, letting them know that you were hoping for something different than what you received during that time. And it might take a while. You might need a little bit of distance from the event before you're able to have that conversation. That's understandable. But you have to decide, is this friendship worth saving? And if so, you're going to have a difficult conversation. I remember my friend and I call it the chicken wing conversation. So I had a friend, we were friends in high school, we were friends in university, and then something had happened, and I can't even remember the details of what had happened. But we decided to go out to talk about it, and we were roommates at the time. So we left the house and talked about it. We went for chicken wings at this little cafe, and we had a really difficult conversation. And I don't remember, again, the details of the conversation, over 20 years ago. But I remember the discomfort. I remember what a risk it was for us to say these difficult things to each other, to kind of reevaluate where we stood in our friendship, to kind of air some things that had been festering. It was very, very uncomfortable to do that. And yet we call that the chicken wing conversation, right? It's something that really deepened our relationship because we were able to kind of push past the discomfort, and work on the friendship, actually make an effort to evolve the friendship together. So it's hard to do, but if you're able to find it in you to have a conversation about how you felt. Now, when you're having that conversation, it's important to own your own feelings, right? Nobody likes to be told you did this and you didn't do that and you made me feel bad, and because then people just get defensive and they don't really hear you. So when you're having the conversation using that ownership language, like, when this happened, I felt, right? I've noticed that when this happens, I respond this way, right? And so kind of owning your reactions as well, and maybe even saying that, it was a very difficult time for me. I think it was my dad had passed away. I wasn't thinking straight, and so, I might not have been as blah blah blah, well, whatever. But if you can muster the courage to do that, I would say that would be a great way to kind of a litmus test for the friendship, right? Is the friendship going to survive and deepen through a conversation, or is this kind of the end because this person just really doesn't get where you're coming from and they think you're overreacting and it's no big deal, and then you know something about the depth and the strength of the friendship. So sometimes people don't even want to have the conversation because they'd rather just let it fade away, right? But the problem when you do that is that life will keep putting people in your path who you'll have to have a difficult conversation with one of them. And that might be a future spouse who's, it could be anybody who's not related to you by blood, so to speak, that you're going to have a difficult conversation with, that you're going to want to invest emotional energy into. So that's the first one, is to being willing to share how you feel for, in your own private ways, but also with the friend. Oh, the other thing about sharing is timing. So being mindful about the timing in which you bring up this conversation. I always tell people, don't have any serious conversations after 8 p.m. because the part of our mind that's a problem solver and a goal setter and can look for solutions is kind of offline by that time in the day. And so we're not as forgiving, and we're not as articulate. So, earlier in the day if you're going to have the conversation. The second is around communication. Now, I know I've been through kind of a series of deaths in the family over the last couple of years. And one of the things I notice people often say is, let me know if you need anything, right? They'll say, oh, I'm so sorry, let me know if you need anything. Now, that is something people say. What I did when I was going through these challenging death situations is I actually called people out on that. I actually followed up with people about that, so they say, let me know if you need anything. And I might say, well, actually, yeah, what would be really helpful is if you could drop off, a dinner a couple times in the next week, because it's just so hard for me to cook right now. So actually taking people up on that offer. And some people don't really mean it. So if they don't really mean it, then they'll start making excuses when you ask for something specific. But those who really do mean it, you're actually giving them a task. Because I know when I've had friends, I have a really good friend whose dad passed away, and it's like I didn't know what to do to help. I didn't know, that she was in a different city, and I didn't really know how I could help. And so one of the things that I did was I sent her like regular check-in text messages, just like, thinking of you, how's your day going? And there wasn't much response because she was grieving. It wasn't like her job to respond to my text messages, but kind of just continuing to stay as a touch point, letting her know that I was there. I hope that she found that helpful. She's never commented on that, but that was something I was trying to do. But I know that when people did specific things for me when I was going through a grieving process, it was so helpful. I remember one of my friends, he asked me specifically, he said, we were going through all the funeral arrangements and things, and he said, do you want us to just look after your kids for a night? Him and his wife and his children, like, do you want to just send the kids over? We have a trampoline, they can play, they can kind of be away from all of what's going on, and you can focus. And it was like a specific suggestion that was so helpful. I would have never asked that because it feels like a bit of a big ask for that particular relationship, but he offered that, right? That would you like us to look after your kids for a night? So if there's a specific thing that you need, you might have to ask for it. And if you're the friend of someone, I know you're the person who's kind of on the receiving side, but if you're the friend of someone who's going through a significant loss or difficult time, to be specific in the things that you offer, right? To say something like, I'm here for you on the weekends, I'm not working, just let me know by Thursday, Friday, and I'll be able to clear my day for you. Be specific rather than let me know if you need anything, because people aren't, when you're in a grieving state, it's hard to think about specific things. And if you ask for specific things when you're grieving, you're more likely to get a clear yes or no. So that's the first thing is, the second thing, which is communicating those like your expectations of what you want your friends to, how you want your friends to show up for you. Because you said that people who I thought would be there for me. Now, your love language, the way you express care for people will be a specific way. And if others weren't expressing care in that way, it could feel like perhaps that they're not there for you. So let me give you an example. One of the love languages is gift giving, right? So, you buy something for me, you give me a physical thing and I feel loved. For me, that's not a very high love language on my list. Like, that's not really something that is high on the list for me. One of the high things for me is words of affirmation. So what was really, really powerful for me was handwritten cards, where people would write a note and write something special. And we actually had a book that we passed around where people could write, memories that they had of my dad as he was passing away, or, in that one end where we knew the end was coming. So words were really, really important to me, are important to me. And so it was through the words that I felt supported, right? If somebody were to buy me a new outfit for the funeral, for example, that wouldn't mean the same to me as a card. And that's me. So you'll have your own love languages, and you can actually be specific, again, based on your love language, what would feel like it's helpful for you. Maybe what would feel like is helpful for you is that your kids can go and sleep at a night somewhere, or these different things, specific things. And what might be helpful for you is just knowing that, you can call someone in the middle of the night, or whatever it is for you. Think about your love language as you're communicating what you need to your friends. And again, this is an event that's already happened. There's not much you can do to change the feeling that they weren't there for you. But there are things you can do to repair and deepen the relationship. And there's things you can do to, moving forward, if you were to face something like this again, how you could frame it in a different way. The third thing is a little bit more, how do we say, a little bit more like from a psychology perspective. Sometimes, in order to avoid walking the difficult journey of bereavement, we find a different problem. So we shift our attention to something else to be mad about, or to be upset about, or to be sad about, that's not the death of the loved one. And so just check in with yourself. Is there a little bit of that happening where it's really difficult to lose someone, and there's so much there that you're going to have to move through? You said it was your dad. So depending on, the relationship you had with your dad, the age, like how they died, all of these things, in order to avoid feeling and experiencing the bereavement and the grief, sometimes we'll make a fight instead. So just check in. Is it some of that happening here, where, you'd rather focus on the people who weren't there for you at the funeral rather than the waves of the emotional healing that has to happen as you've lost this significant person from your life? I'm assuming they're significant to your life. So just kind of a check-in, right? From a psychology perspective, is, am I avoiding the hard feelings by focusing on this thing that I'm disappointed about at the time of the funeral or at the time of the death? So just something to think about. Those are my three thoughts about this. So the first is sharing how you feel. The second is the clear communication. And then the third is that check-in. Are you avoiding your own grief? These are just some ideas and suggestions to give you kind of a deeper dive. I would have to kind of sit with you and know you, Manu, but hopefully this was helpful. If you know someone who is grieving or going through difficult times, send them this video, reach out to them, check in on them, and as you build your resources, you can be there for the people who need you the most. So I encourage you to like and subscribe to our channel, and I will see you next time. Bye.